I thought I knew who I was, until one ordinary afternoon shattered everything. My name is Claire. I'm 31 years old, and for most of my life I believed my story was simple. A quiet childhood in the suburbs, two parents who loved me, a sister who sometimes felt more like a rival than a friend, and a life that, while not perfect, was mine. I never imagined that beneath the surface of our family photos and polite holiday dinners lay secrets so deep they could tear apart everything I thought I knew about myself. It started with an argument, one of those heated, pointless sibling fights that feel small until suddenly they don't. My sister Hannah had always had a sharp tongue, but that night at our mother's house, her words cut differently. We were standing in the kitchen, the smell of roast chicken still heavy in the air when she snapped, "You act so self-righteous, Claire. If only you knew what Mom and Dad did for you, maybe you wouldn't be so smug." I froze. The room went quiet except for the faint ticking of the clock above the stove. I asked her what she meant, but she only smirked and poured herself another glass of wine. It should have ended there, just another bitter remark to add to the long list of things Hannah and I would never resolve. But something in her tone, something in the glint of her eyes burrowed into me. That night, as I lay in my childhood bedroom staring at the ceiling, her words replayed again and again. "If only you knew what Mom and Dad did for you." The next morning, I tried to shake it off, to chalk it up to her usual cruelty. But when I walked past the old family albums stacked on the living room shelf, my hand moved almost without thought. I pulled one down, the one labeled Claire's Early Years, in my mother's familiar neat handwriting. Page after page of birthdays and Christmases, of first days of school and beach vacations. But as I flipped backward, looking for the earliest photos, I noticed the same strange gap I had ignored my whole life. There were no pictures before age 4. No baby photos. No toddler years. Just me, already speaking in full sentences, already running in a backyard I barely remembered. I asked my mother about it that afternoon while she was folding laundry. She gave the same explanation she had given me before years ago when I first noticed there had been a fire. A box of old photos destroyed, memories lost. But this time, her voice faltered just slightly, her eyes darting away from mine as though she had rehearsed the line too many times. And in that hesitation, I felt the ground beneath me shift. The truth has a way of clawing its way to the surface, even when you try to bury it. And once the questions began, I couldn't stop them. Why couldn't my mother ever remember the address of the house we supposedly lived in before moving here? Why did my father always change the subject when I asked about extended family? Why did Hannah smirk, like she knew something I didn't? The answers began to unravel one rainy afternoon when I returned to my apartment after work. On my doorstep sat a plain envelope, no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper with 4 words typed in bold black letters: "Ask them about Rachel." My heart thudded in my chest as I stared at the note. The name meant nothing to me, yet it felt loaded heavy with secrets I wasn't supposed to uncover. I called my parents immediately, but when I asked if the name Rachel meant anything, there was a long silence. Then my mother said quietly, "Claire, please let it go." But I couldn't, because in that silence I heard everything they weren't saying. I heard betrayal. I heard fear. And somewhere beneath it all, I heard the faint echo of the truth clawing its way out of the dark. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the note still clutched in my hand, the name Rachel looping through my mind like a haunting melody I couldn't silence. Who was she? Why had someone left that message for me? And why had my mother's voice cracked like fragile glass when I asked her about it? By dawn, my chest felt tight, my head heavy with questions I didn't know how to ask. I thought about calling Hannah, but I already knew what she'd do: laugh, twist the knife, and leave me bleeding with more questions than answers. So instead, I did what I've always done when the ground beneath me feels unsteady. I went digging. I started with the family albums again, combing through every photograph for clues. I noticed details I'd never cared about before: my parents' clothes, the background of the houses, even the expressions on their faces. But the same gap stared back at me. No photos before age 4. No baby books. No ultrasound scans. It was as if my life simply began mid-sentence with no prologue. I opened drawers, old boxes, the cedar chest at the foot of my mother's bed when she wasn't looking. That's when I found it, an old newspaper clipping yellowed with age, folded so many times the paper felt ready to tear. It wasn't about me. It was about a missing child. Local girl disappears, police searching for leads. The photo was grainy, a little girl about 3 years old with a wide, toothy grin, green eyes flecked with gold. My eyes. She wore a dress with sunflowers on it and a bow in her hair. Beneath the photo, the name printed in bold letters made my blood run cold. Rachel Marie Carter. I couldn't breathe. My hands trembled so badly the paper slipped from my fingers. I scrambled to pick it up, my heart slamming against my ribs. I read it again and again, every word sinking like stones in my stomach. Rachel. The name on the envelope. The name that made my mother's voice crack. I took the clipping straight to my parents' house, unable to wait. They were sitting in the kitchen, drinking coffee like it was just another quiet morning. I dropped the clipping onto the table, the sound sharper than I expected. "What is this?" I demanded. My father's face went pale. My mother's lips parted, but no sound came out. For a moment, the only sound was the hum of the refrigerator and the ticking of the old clock on the wall. Then my mother whispered, "Where did you find that?" "That's not the question," I snapped, my voice shaking. "The question is, why was it hidden? Why do I have no baby pictures? Why is this girl's face the same as mine?" My father stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the tile. He pressed his hands flat on the table as if bracing against a storm. "Claire," he said, his voice low and firm, "you need to let this go. For your own good." But how could I let it go when the pieces were finally clicking into place? I felt as if the floor was tilting beneath me, dragging me towards some truth I wasn't ready to see but couldn't stop chasing. I left their house that day with my mother crying into her hands, and my father's eyes filled with something I had never seen before, not anger, not disappointment, but fear. And that terrified me more than anything. That night I dreamed of a little girl's laughter echoing in a garden, the flash of a yellow sundress, a voice calling Rachel through the summer air. I woke with tears on my face, though I had no memory of ever living that moment. I needed answers, and I knew my parents weren't going to give them willingly, so I turned to the only person who might, Hannah. She met me at a cafe the next morning, arms crossed, expression unreadable. "You're digging, aren't you?" she said before I even opened my mouth. "What do you know?" I asked. Her smile was thin, bitter. "More than you. I was old enough to remember. You weren't. They told me never to say anything, but I guess the truth was bound to come out sooner or later." My throat went dry. "Say anything about what?" She leaned across the table, her voice low, sharp as a blade. "About the fact that you're not who you think you are. That Claire isn't even your real name." The world seemed to tilt again, my breath catching in my chest. My hands curled into fists in my lap to stop their trembling. "What's my real name?" I whispered. Her eyes glinted with something between cruelty and pity. "Rachel." The sound of my sister's words lodged itself deep inside me, echoing so loud I could barely hear the clatter of dishes and chatter in the cafe around us. Rachel. The name from the envelope. The name from the newspaper clipping. The name that felt like it belonged to someone else, but now pulsed inside me like it had always been there waiting. I shook my head, refusing to let it sink in. "You're lying," I whispered, though even as I said it, I could see the truth in her eyes. Hannah leaned back in her chair, sipping her coffee, as if she hadn't just detonated a bomb in the middle of my life. "I wish I was," she said. "But you wanted answers. Well, there's one. You're not Claire. You never were." My stomach twisted so violently I thought I might be sick. "Then who am I?" Her gaze softened, but only slightly. "You're the little girl they found. The one from the news. Mom and Dad took you in after she disappeared. They told me you were mine now, too. They said if I loved you enough, you'd forget. And for a while you did." I stared at her, every nerve in my body burning. "You mean they stole me?" "They saved you," she snapped back, but the edge in her voice betrayed the doubt curling beneath her words. "At least that's what they always said. They told me your real family didn't want you anymore, that they were dangerous, that you were safer with us. Do you have any idea how many nights I heard Mom crying? How many times Dad swore we'd take this secret to the grave?" My chest tightened, breath catching in my throat. It didn't make sense. None of it did. but the pieces, every missing photo, every evasive answer, every shadow in my parents' eyes clicked into place like a cruel puzzle. I left Hannah sitting there with her coffee untouched, her eyes following me as I stumbled out into the cold afternoon. The air felt too sharp, too real, as if the whole world had shifted a degree to the left. I walked without knowing where I was going, my feet carrying me blocks away, until I found myself standing in front of the library. Inside, I pulled up the archives, searching for every article on Rachel Marie Carter. The girl in the sunflower dress. The missing child. Page after page painted the story of a family torn apart by tragedy. A mother who begged for answers. A father who searched day and night. Neighbors who whispered theories about strangers and abductions. And then, nothing. The trail went cold. Rachel was never found. Until me. I sat there, my hands pressed against my mouth to stifle the sobs rising in my chest. If Hannah was telling the truth, then my life, everything I thought I knew about myself, was stolen from someone else's grief. And my parents, the people I trusted most, had built my entire world on a lie. I confronted them that evening, storming into their house with the clippings in my hands. "Tell me the truth." I demanded, my voice shaking but loud, echoing through the walls that had once felt like home. My mother's face crumpled, tears spilling instantly. My father went rigid, his jaw clenched. For a long moment, they said nothing. And then my mother whispered, "We couldn't lose you." "I wasn't yours to lose," I shouted, the words tearing from my throat like broken glass. She collapsed into sobs while my father finally spoke, his voice low, raw. "We found you on the side of the road. You were alone. You were hurt. We tried to find your family, but when we learned who you were, we knew if we gave you back we'd never see you again. And we couldn't bear it." "You kidnapped me," I spat. He flinched but didn't deny it. "We saved you," he said again, as if repeating the words could make them true. I looked at them, these people I had called mom and dad my entire life, and felt nothing but betrayal. Love and fury tangled inside me until I couldn't tell one from the other. My childhood, my identity, my very name, they had taken it all and replaced it with a lie. I left that night with the clipping clenched in my hand, my mother's sobs chasing me out the door, my father's silence heavy on my back. For the first time, I didn't know who I was or where I belonged. All I knew was that somewhere out there was a family who had lost a daughter named Rachel, and I was her. The days that followed blurred together, a haze of sleepless nights and hollow mornings where I stared at myself in the mirror, trying to recognize the woman looking back. I traced the lines of my face, the green flecks in my eyes, the curve of my mouth, all the things I once thought belonged to Claire. Now they felt borrowed pieces of someone else's story I had been wearing without knowing. Every time I whispered my name out loud, it sounded foreign, wrong. I couldn't shake the image of that little girl in the newspaper clipping. The sunflower dress, the toothy smile, the bow in her hair. My smile, my eyes, me. I was Rachel, stolen from one family and planted into another like a secret no one wanted to admit existed. The thought made me sick. I began searching obsessively. I dug through old police reports, scoured forums dedicated to missing persons, even contacted local journalists who had covered the disappearance back then. Most leads were dead ends, but one name kept surfacing: the Carters. My family. My real family. I found their address, still the same after all these years, only 2 towns over. The thought that they had been so close all this time made my stomach twist. I sat in my car outside their house for nearly an hour one Saturday afternoon, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. Through the window, I saw a woman watering flowers on the porch. Her hair was streaked with gray, but her posture, the set of her shoulders, reminded me of my own. Could that be my mother? My real mother? I didn't knock that day. Fear rooted me in place. I drove home, my heart pounding, tears streaking down my face. I told myself I needed more time, that barging into their lives after decades would only reopen wounds. But deep down, I knew it was because I was terrified of what I might find. What if they rejected me? What if I wasn't the missing piece they wanted back? Meanwhile, my relationship with the people who raised me, mom and dad, crumbled. I stopped answering their calls, ignored their knocks on my door. My father left voicemails, his voice rough, pleading. "Please, Claire, Rachel, Whatever name you want to use, we love you. We only did what we thought was right. Each word felt like a knife twisting deeper. They loved me, but love built on lies was a prison. Hannah, on the other hand, seemed almost relieved the truth was out. She called me one night, her voice sharp. "So now you know. What are you going to do about it?" I wanted to scream at her to blame her for holding the truth hostage all these years, but instead I just asked, "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" She sighed. "Because I was a kid too. They made me promise. And by the time I was old enough to know better, you were happy. You loved them. I couldn't be the one to destroy that." Her words stung because part of me knew she was right, but another part wanted to shake her until she admitted she'd chosen silence over my truth. The breaking point came when I received another envelope on my doorstep. This one wasn't typed. It was handwritten, shaky, almost desperate. Inside was a single photo. It showed a little girl standing between two adults, smiling proudly, her small hands clutching a stuffed rabbit. On the back, scrawled in faded ink, were the words, "Rachel's 3rd birthday. We miss you every day." I collapsed to the floor, clutching the photo to my chest. That was me. That was my real birthday. And those were my real parents. The ones who had been robbed of me. I couldn't ignore it anymore. The next morning, I drove back to the Carter's house. My legs felt like lead as I walked up the path, the photo trembling in my hand. The woman I'd seen before was on the porch again, trimming flowers. She looked up, and when our eyes met, she froze. For a long moment, neither of us moved. Then her face crumpled, her hand flying to her mouth as tears spilled down her cheeks. "Rachel," she whispered. The sound of that name, my name spoken by her voice, cracked something open inside me that had been sealed my whole life. I stood there on the porch. My breath caught somewhere between my chest and throat, unable to move, unable to speak. The woman, my mother, though my lips still couldn't shape the word, stumbled forward, trembling hands reaching out as though afraid I would vanish if she touched me too quickly. "I knew it," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I knew you were alive." Her fingers brushed my arm, tentative, then clutched me with a desperation that made my knees weak. I let her hold me, my own arms stiff at first, then giving in, circling her fragile frame. I could feel her sobs shaking through me, as if all the grief she had carried for decades was pouring out at once. When she pulled back, her eyes searched my face with a hunger I couldn't bear. "You're her. You're Rachel, my baby girl." The words should have filled me with warmth, but instead they tangled with confusion and betrayal. I wanted to believe her, to sink into the safety of her embrace, but how could I when I'd spent 31 years calling someone else mom? Before I could speak, a man appeared at the doorway. His hair was thinner, his shoulders stooped with age, but the moment his eyes fell on me, he stopped breathing. His lips parted, and for a heartbeat the world went still. Then he whispered, barely audible, "Rachel." The sound of my name in his voice cracked me open. My legs gave out, and I sank onto the porch steps, burying my face in my hands. Both of them knelt beside me, their arms wrapping around me, 3 broken pieces of the same puzzle finally pressed together again. Inside, they showed me more photos, dozens of them. Pictures of me as a baby wrapped in a pink blanket. Pictures of me toddling in the backyard with that stuffed rabbit. Pictures of birthdays I had no memory of, smiles I didn't recognize as my own. Each one stabbed me with the truth I had lived another life before the one I knew, a life stolen away. They told me everything. How one summer afternoon I had been playing in the yard and disappeared. How the neighborhood searched, the police combed the woods, the posters plastered across town. How days turned into weeks, weeks into years, and hope turned into a wound that never closed. And now here I was, alive, sitting in their living room, their daughter returned. But it wasn't that simple. Because while they wept with joy, I wept with confusion. Yes, they were my blood, my beginning. But the people who raised me, no matter how twisted their choices were, also my parents. I carried their lessons, their love, and their lies in equal measure. I stayed for hours listening, asking questions, watching my mother's hands tremble as she poured tea, noticing how my father's eyes never left me, as if he feared I might disappear again. Part of me wanted to stay forever, to curl into the home that should have been mine. But another part pulled me away, reminding me of the years I had lived elsewhere, the bonds I couldn't simply erase. When I finally left, my mother clutched my hands. "Please," she begged, "don't vanish again. Let us know you. Let us love you." I nodded, but inside a storm raged. because the reunion was only half the story. There was still the other half. The parents who had taken me lied to me, built a life on stolen truth. Driving home, I gripped the wheel so tightly my knuckles ached. Questions circled like vultures. Did they really save me as they claimed? Or had they kidnapped me, robbing two grieving parents of their daughter? And if they loved me, why had their love required so many lies? I parked outside my apartment and sat in silence, staring at the dark windows, my reflection in the glass, looking like a stranger. For the first time in my life, I felt like no one. Not Claire, not Rachel, just a hollow space between two worlds belonging fully to neither. But one thing I knew with absolute certainty: I couldn't keep this secret buried any longer. The truth had found me, and now it demanded to be faced. And the people who had raised me, the people I had once trusted with everything, would have to answer for what they had done. The next morning, I drove to my parents' house. No, not my parents, not anymore. The people who raised me, yes, but I could no longer force myself to call them that without choking on the word. My hands shook on the steering wheel, the whole way there, a storm building in my chest, equal parts grief and rage. They were waiting for me. My mother must have seen my car from the window because she opened the door before I even knocked. Her eyes were red, her face pale. My father stood behind her arms, folded his jaw tight as if bracing for impact. I stepped inside, clutching the photograph from the Carter's house, the one with me on my 3rd birthday, grinning between two people I now knew were my real parents. I laid it on the kitchen table like evidence in a trial. "You lied to me my whole life," I said, my voice trembling but steady. "You stole me." My mother crumpled into a chair, her hand covering her mouth. Tears welled instantly. "We didn't steal you, Rachel," she whispered, using the name like a desperate plea. "We found you. You were abandoned on the roadside. No one came for you." "Stop lying!" I snapped, my voice breaking. I slammed my hand against the table, the sound sharp and final. "I met them. My family. They never stopped looking for me. They never stopped loving me. You didn't save me, you kidnapped me." My father's eyes burned into mine. "We gave you a life," he said, his tone clipped, almost defensive. "We loved you as our own. Everything we did was for you." "No," I spat, tears spilling hot down my cheeks. "Everything you did was for yourselves. You wanted a child, so you took one. And you built my whole life on a lie." The silence that followed was suffocating. My mother sobbed quietly, shaking her head as if she could will the truth away. My father's face hardened, but beneath the anger in his eyes, I saw something else: fear. He was terrified not just of losing me, but of the world finding out what they had done. I felt something shift inside me, then a clarity I hadn't known I was capable of. "You don't get to tell me who I am anymore," I said softly but firmly. "You don't get to rewrite the story. I know the truth now, and so will everyone else." My father's jaw clenched. "You wouldn't try me." I walked out before either of them could stop me, the weight of 31 years of betrayal finally lifting as I closed the door behind me. But the victory was hollow. That night, lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling with tears burning in my eyes. I had torn myself from one family, but fitting into the other wasn't simple either. The Carters welcomed me with open arms, but I was a stranger to them as much as they were to me. My childhood memories were filled with someone else's traditions, someone else's laughter. My heart was stitched with threads from both worlds, and unraveling one unraveled me too. Revenge and truth are strange companions. Part of me wanted to see the people who raised me punished, to watch them face the law, to make them answer for every stolen year. But another part of me, a quieter part, still remembered bedtime stories, scraped knees bandaged with care, the trembling hands that held me when I cried. They loved me. But their love had been a cage. Weeks passed, and the Carters tried to fold me into their lives. They invited me to Sunday dinners, showed me old photo albums, shared stories of the little girl I had been before I was taken. I smiled, I nodded, I tried to belong. But inside I felt like an imposter. I wasn't just Rachel. I wasn't just Claire. I was something in between, someone built out of betrayal, someone who carried two mothers' tears inside her. One evening, sitting alone with the truth jar, Sophie and I had once made— no, not Sophie, that was someone else's story. I reminded myself. I scribbled a question on a scrap of paper. What makes a family blood or love? I dropped it inside and stared at the glass, my reflection fractured through it. There was no simple answer. Maybe there never would be. But I knew one thing: I would never again let silence decide for me. The truth was mine now, and I would carry it no matter how heavy, no matter how broken it made me. And as I closed my eyes that night, I realized something else. Maybe I wasn't meant to choose between Claire and Rachel. Maybe I was both. Maybe the real revenge, the real justice was not letting either of them be erased. So I whispered into the dark, steady this time, certain. My name is Rachel. My name is Claire. I am both. And I am mine. If this story touched you, please like this video, share it with someone who might need to hear it, and leave a comment with your thoughts. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this, raw, true, and unforgettable.